Episode 31, Unfiltered. We have Mr. Douglas Burns here. Say hello, good sir.
Hello, how are you, Phil?
Doing
Josh.
good.
What's happening?
What's happening? That's good. There's our little intro beat. We always start with an intro. Josh has got it pumping
I like
today.
it.
Yeah, absolutely. The Unfiltered Podcast.
Is it the same every time as like the theme song, or do you
so
mix
far.
it up? Okay, it
Theme
works.
song.
Yeah, it definitely works.
We have an intro and an outro too, so you'll hear the outro a little bit
okay.
later. Right. Yeah.
All right.
I'm very excited that you're here.
Thanks. I'm very happy to be here.
Have you ever done a podcast before like this?
For a while, so I write this column called Political Mercury for City View in Des Moines, and I used to do podcasts with that, but our technology is definitely of the JV variety compared to this, setup. Or this is impressive, Phil.
Well, you're a professional, so to hear you say that is like that makes me happy. That this
well,
actually looks.
I write, right? So
Yes.
yeah,
You're a writer.
yeah.
Which you're the vice president and the co-owner of the Jefferson Herald and the Herald string of newspapers.
Correct. So we have Carroll and Jefferson. At one time, we had a few more papers, but the industry's been kind of difficult. So, but the Carroll Times Herald's been in my family for about 100 years, and then we were privileged a decade ago, in 2012, to take over the Jefferson Herald. Rick Moran, from the Moran family, that's such a presence here in Jefferson. He's worked alongside our family. So, Rick's as much a part of the Jefferson Herald, honestly, as I am, and that's the way we want it. And it's a great relationship. Lucky to have it.
Because he still writes, he has columns like every week.
Yeah, he writes a weekly column, and that weekly column is now distributed in many papers across Iowa. Rick's column is, and then of course he covers local government and does some other features for us. So he is a defining voice in the paper.
He's just a good writer, right? Or,
Very talented. He's a good writer, a good mentor, and Jefferson's been lucky to have him for most of his life.
Right on. Yes, the Moran family, they've had a finger on the pulse of Jefferson for.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, and I'm lucky to know other people in his family too.
Right on.
So I was speaking in Kansas City to the Kansas City Plaza Club about a column I had in the Kansas City Star a couple of months ago, and I ran into Rick Moran's brother-in-law, was a member of the club.
Oh my!
And started grilling me with questions. They were all tough. So
about what? About
the column that I wrote.
Oh,
so,
got it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
The column you write for the Des Moines newspaper, City View.
Well, actually, this was one that I had published in the Kansas City Star.
Okay.
So I go to the Plaza Club thinking it's going to be a new downtown Kansas City audience, and that I can, maybe speak it, in a way that maybe I wouldn't locally. And there's Rick Moran's brother-in-law, first person I met when I walked in the door.
Crazy how that happens.
I know, right? Yeah.
We think the world's big, and then there's moments like that where it's like, maybe the world is smaller than we think. But
that's right, Phil.
Yeah. I don't know. Weird coincidences. Well, thanks for coming here because I know you live in Carroll, but it sounds like you're very well connected to the Jefferson, the people that live here, and GCDC. You sit on that board as well.
Correct. Yeah.
Yep. As well as the Carroll GCDC, or I suppose it's not the GCDC for Carroll, but it's the
Carroll Area Development Corporation. So
there you go.
I'm the only person who's on both boards. So I try to do what I love this community, Jefferson. I'm greatly appreciated for how our family has been welcomed, and we've tried to contribute, but I also understand that my job really is to play a supporting role to people like Sid Jones, Ken Paxton, Rick Moran, Chuck Offenberger, Norm Fandel, so many others, that Jim Ober, that I've been pleased and blessed to work with over the last decade. So love Jefferson, consider it home. But again, I do not go to bed at night in a Jefferson home. I live in Carroll, but I've also found, like in economic development, that having a strong Carroll ally in the room can help. And one of the things that the GCDC has been very good about is having not just myself as a member, but John Rigler, who's a banker that lives in the Des Moines area. He's a part of it. So that sort of open thinking from the leadership here has really allowed you to develop some allies that I would argue few places in rural Iowa can count.
We've got a unique little rural Iowa network.
You do.
true, right?
Yeah.
And out. Not that you're old. You got a few years on me here, but
Yeah, I've got about I think 20.
all,
I'm 20 years older than you.
all I
So.
mean by that is that you've been more places and you've done more things than me. So you have theoretically you would have more opinions about things. But my question is this is unique.
I've also made more mistakes than you too.
Well, okay. Well,
yeah,
that's fair. We'll get to that.
Okay.
Won't we?
Yeah, we will.
This little Highway 30 stretch, Carroll, Jefferson, Boone, I mean, is rare, unique. Like there's things happening in this network.
And I take a little farther west over to Denison. I mean, we're working on this Nueva Envita project, which I think is terrific, that Latino IQ and my close friend Carlos Arguello is heading, and Chuck Offenberger's a big part of it. Sid Jones and the GCDC have been behind it. But that project will definitely reach into Denison, into Perry, presumably maybe even into Marshalltown, which is also on Highway 30. Perry isn't, but if you take that stretch basically from Marshalltown to Denison, I think if Jefferson, using your sort of Highway 30 geographic point, Phil, I would we're kind of positioned in a midpoint in that, and as we try to really reach these Latino rich communities, I think it's important that we look at that corridor stretching from closer to the Missouri River to, beyond I-35.
Sure. Which this, as you see here, here's your photo there. It's Josh is great behind the computer. Here he is. Carlos is there. Your picture's there. Latino IQ. The whole idea behind this, correct me if I'm wrong, is about preservation of rural communities.
Initially, it's about, to use Carlos's language, it's about stopping the bleeding and making sure that we are able to preserve the population, preserve the business community, and hopefully restock the labor force, because right now in this county there are between 200 and 300 jobs, good jobs that are career jobs that are available. So we want to be able to reach into communities and draw people here, probably initially, Phil, as commuters, because we just don't have the housing in Greene County, but eventually as residents, and then longer term as legacy residents, people like yourself who move back after going to high school here and then become part of multi-generational communities.
What's the deal? Why are rural communities bleeding? Where are they going? Like what has changed in culture? Because it dates pre-COVID. I mean, COVID changed the world, if you will. But I mean, this change has been going on since how long, would you say?
Throughout my career, I mean, I am 52. I started serving on the Carroll Area Development Corporation when I was in my late 20s. I've been the youngest person in the room at a lot of economic development meetings for most of my career. I still am often the youngest person in the room at age 52.
Sure.
So we've tried to persuade alumni, graduates of our area high schools to come back. In Greene County, Greene County was the first home-based Iowa community. That was a community, an effort in the governor's office to provide jobs for returning veterans, and it was a great thing that we were first in that program. An even better thing that we were first in that program a few months before the Iowa Racing and Gaming Commission voted on the casino, which, if we're going to be honest, that was part of my strategy in advocating for that first in the state status, as I thought it would help us get the gaming vote through. And if we can help veterans, obviously that is an important mission and terrific. But I never really thought that home-based Iowa would bring the kind of critical mass that we needed. And you were in Minneapolis for a while and decided to come back. Too many people that grow up in Carroll or Jefferson, like you and I did, we came back, they don't. So we need to reach newcomers, and with Carlos Arguello and Latino IQ, we're going after the Latino community, and this will be a multi-year project. And hopefully in 5 to 10 years, when you're continuing to do this podcast, you'll have some people with very different backgrounds than yours and mine
Sure.
on the other side of this table.
What would stop it from happening? what would be the dam in the process that we're sitting here talking again 5-10 years down the road and it didn't happen?
Right. Well, I think we've overcome that hurdle. I think the community here has embraced it. So, I mean, the answer to that question is, intolerance. If those forces coalesced in opposition to it, but I think the necessity of filling key positions and jobs in the county, I think people understand that, and that might outweigh any intolerant impulses that some people might have. They would maybe are rethinking that, hopefully, and improving and getting better as people, or if not, they're just keeping those views to themselves and publicly saying and doing the right thing, which isn't like the best solution, but it's an adequate one.
Because it's not stopping the process,
Correct.
basically.
Yeah.
Do you think?
I mean, we had all these town halls, and there were really only a handful of incidents where there was a guy at the very first town hall we had in Jefferson, the Latino IQ town hall on Nueva Envita, the project we're talking about, who was clearly coming from a racist place. That being said, he doesn't live in the county. He is from Coon Rapids, and he was asking questions that we wanted to answer. So certainly it wasn't great sitting there enduring some of the racism, but it did give Carlos Arguello a pivot point to be able to address some of the elephants in the room,
which, like, language barrier and
yeah, right, exactly,
sure, which is a big one,
right,
yeah,
right. No, some of his questions were legitimate.
Sure,
it was just you could tell his motivation wasn't really an honest one, that he was looking to try to trip us up and looking to advance a white supremacist sort of ideology, I think.
So this issue, it hits home a little more for you because you were adopted,
right?
Grew up in Cedar Rapids, but then at some point moved to Carroll.
So I was born in Cedar Rapids, but adopted as a baby. So I'm technically a Cedar Rapids native. So when I testified for Wild Rose was trying to get a casino sited in Cedar Rapids. I still think they should get a shot at it. I don't think it makes sense to have 19 state-regulated casinos and not allow one in your state's second largest city, Cedar Rapids. So anyway, when I testified in favor of it to help Tom Timmons and other people that we all, many of us here in Jefferson know and respect, I introduced myself as a native of Cedar Rapids, and a lot of people behind me were laughing because I only lived there for 2 weeks.
Because they knew your story.
I came from the crib to the Carroll newspaper family by way of Cedar Rapids.
So, well, that's so many questions. One rabbit trail here is do you know anything about your birth parents?
No, I've always thought that would. So I'm one of those adopted kids that thinks that would be disrespectful to my family.
Yeah.
So my opinion has always been, if somebody sought me out for like a bone marrow transplant or a medical reason or some other reason, that I would be open to the discussion and the connection. But I've just have such a strong sense of loyalty to my family that I would feel that some of that fealty and loyalty would be broken if I sought out biological family members.
So you're not following that movie script of hunting down your biological family.
Oh, there's a no.
You're not about to do that.
No,
and you're content. You're obviously content.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, you grew up in a supportive household.
I did. Yeah, and a diverse one too, which is fortunate.
2 siblings, 3 kids in this family, all adopted.
Correct.
Yes. You and then a brother and a sister.
That's right.
Tell me more about them.
My brother would have been, so I came from northeast Iowa. Biological parents were teenagers. Same situation for my brother, who's also white and came from more the northwest Iowa area, more our neck of the woods, actually. And then my sister came over during the Saigon airlift from Vietnam. So she's Vietnamese and teaches English as a second language in the Des Moines public schools. So I say her heritage is Vietnamese. She's very much American. She writes our are the food columns that you read in the Jefferson Herald and the Carroll Times Herald.
Okay.
She writes those, and there is a decidedly sort of Iowa farm wife sort of style to her cooking. So she doesn't live on a farm, or never, spend any time on one, but she definitely cooks like a Midwesterner preparing for an Iowa State tailgate or something like that.
She's an Iowan.
She went to Iowa too. Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
So spent her life in Iowa.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Except the first 6 months when she was in war-torn Saigon, as it was falling to the North Vietnamese. Yeah.
So came over as 6 months old infant. Does she know anything about her birth parents?
So she did that 23andMe thing, and so she doesn't know anything about her immediate family, but she through the 23andMe networking, she's found some cousins and second cousins. There's a Vietnamese actor named DC Wolf who lives in Los Angeles, and she's that's her second cousin.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So she figured that out through just a little bit of digging. Then 23andMe.
Just the 23andMe thing, I guess,
Sure.
generates that for people, which is why I've never done it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because you're content,
Right.
satisfied,
Right.
cared for.
I want to jump in here really quick and ask you
Josh.
now, as far as your conclusion, or not your conclusion, but your understanding of
Right.
the fact that it is disrespectful, perhaps for. Well, I want to say perhaps. I haven't. I want to get your perspective, because having that maturity to have that understanding, was that something that you realized on your own? Was that something that you realized just from, where did you come to that conclusion? Because I think a lot of people are influenced by different storylines, like Philip was saying.
I guess just growing up in the newspaper family, that's just what we do. And I've been close to, my late uncle, Jim Wilson, who a lot of people in this community knew. I've just been very proud to succeed him, sit in his desk, behind his desk in the same office that both he and my grandfather were in. And then through the years, I was able to meet the owners of the Centerville paper, Bob Beck, who ran for governor in the 60s in the Republican primary and lost to Bob Ray. So yeah, just having all those family newspaper connections has been really important to me. So I've just never had an interest in finding my biological parents that family.
Makes sense. Yeah.
And that being said, I know a lot of other adopted kids who have, and I think it's just an individualized decision.
Yeah.
And I respect it either way. I wouldn't be out there writing columns or, setting up websites or running some kind of a nonprofit urging people not to do it.
Right. Well, that's great to get your perspective on it. 'Cause I think it's very fascinating.
And things can go sideways. I have a cousin who's adopted, and it's been a mixed bag in terms of seeking out and other people. I've known other people besides her that have found their biological parents, and it can be, it's a mixed.
It's not always enriching.
No, it's not always fit for an Oprah Winfrey kind of reunion.
That's exactly what I thought of. Right. How interesting.
Which when we were talking on the phone earlier, you kind of mentioned that kind of cultural diversity or blending of your family was advantageous to you in a lot of ways.
Yeah, when you grow up in a family like that, so I went from Carroll to Northwestern University, just north of Chicago in Evanston, Illinois, and then I lived in Washington, D.C. for 4 years, worked for the Palm Beach Post in Florida, worked for the Ames Tribune, and then have been active in a lot of journalism and political circles. And when you, at age 4 or 5, I think I was 5. You go to O'Hare Airport in Chicago, and you see your father come down, the runway with your new sister, and she's Asian, and then you grow up in that kind of a home. I've never really had to act or adjust when I'm in different environments around people that aren't like you and me, Phil.
Sure.
I've just thought that's been a blessing that's opened a lot of doors personally and professionally, and I have my foresighted mom and late father to thank for making that decision.
Do you know what motivated them to adopt?
Well, they wanted a third child, and I think they were moved by what they saw happening in Vietnam and saw this as a way for the United States to sort of help make reparations for what we did in Vietnam. My mom, when some of the first memories I have are being on a stroller at a protest of the Vietnam War on the Simpson campus.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was an era. That was a crazy era.
Right.
It's a crazy era.
Right.
Gen X. You called yourself Gen X, right?
That's what the world calls me. Yeah.
Sure, that's what the world calls you.
I'm in that. Well, I mean, I'm in that demographic. So
Right on. Yes.
yeah.
Which,
So my biological father, he was Vietnam era draft age. So who knows? He could have. I mean, he could have gone. My sister and I have had those conversations. We don't really know what her parents did, and so and I don't necessarily, I wasn't. I was alive back then, but I wasn't a politically engaged adult. So
Right.
I don't know how I would have fallen on the Vietnam War.
Sure.
Had I been an older person then.
So I am curious about your perspective on something else.
Yeah.
What do you think is the main driver where people are that's preventing people from being more inclusive? What do you think that if they were just to understand a piece or something that a lesson, what would you say that is that's preventing people from making that jump into a more inclusive society?
I think most of all it's a blend of fear and habit. And I think once you start day-to-day interacting with, people of different, cultures, you realize very, very quickly how artificial these barriers that we set up between each other are. That, people are really just people. And, when you're around people regularly, you certainly understand that there are differences, but it really just kind of fades away and doesn't become part of your day-to-day interaction. I mean, in a larger political or cultural context, you obviously understand the differences. Like we went on so my friend Lorena Lopez and myself went to a fundraising meeting in California for the Western Iowa Journalism Foundation, and we were with my friend Nick Heftman, who's African American, and we went into a fairly affluent area, and we weren't sure we had the right address, so somebody had to get out of the car and kind of go to the mailboxes and walk around the cul-de-sac, and obviously I was the one, for sad but obvious reasons, who got out of the car and approached some of these homes. So I understand, again, sadly, that is so when you're in the exterior world interacting, you need to be an ally and understand that there are these differences. But wow, when you're just hanging out at home or you're at a restaurant with your friends and there are people that are just, you just realize how, again, artificial those barriers are. And I just wish more people would open up and have experiences with people who aren't like them, because it makes your business and your organization stronger. And one of the reasons our newspaper has been in Carroll has been so strong through the years is we've had a lot of diversity. I've had 2 women who are Jewish work for us. I've had multiple Latinos work for us, and people of other backgrounds, and they just bring perspectives to news gathering that I don't have. So that just makes the Carroll Times-Herald a stronger paper. And not only that, but then when somebody like my friend Nick Heftman, who worked in Carroll, when he goes from Carroll to New York City and then Los Angeles, and he's with CBS This Morning now, and he's in newsroom meetings, or other people who have worked for our paper who are at larger news organizations like the Boulder Daily Camera, Denver Post, and people are railing against rural Iowa and suggesting that we're all rednecks or hicks. They can insert their opinion and say, look, there are issues in Jefferson or Carroll, but by and large, most people are good, and those stereotypes really aren't as prevalent as people on the coasts think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So we get, by having, that diversity, we get the benefit of allies then who defend us. And I've always thought that, rather than looking at ourselves outside of the diversity discussion, 20% of the United States is rural, and we are really underserved. And instead of looking to compete against other groups, we ought to try to form alliances and realize that we're part of the discussion on diversity.
Well said.
Which, on your original question, had the word inclusion in it and what's preventing inclusion. And your initial answer was about a blend of fear and habit. And that sticks out to me because there's a somewhat famous Morgan Freeman clip when I think he's just doing an interview for a movie. And some reporter is like, so how do some racist charged thing was going on, racially charged thing was going on. And someone asks him, how do we get beyond this issue of race? And he says, stop talking about it. And your answer of fear and habit is like, a series of many things that has wired you to do or think one way or another, And so when he says stop talking about it, I almost think that means to just let seeing race let it pass into your subconscious as it just is. And it's not something you have to notice all the time, and let that become your habit. And then you just start seeing a person in a soul instead of someone that you think has a stereotype to go with who they are.
Well, respectfully, I disagree with Morgan Freeman. I think you do have to talk about it. You can't ignore that it's there. I mean, if you and I would have been at the top supermarket in Buffalo in the store working, we probably would not have been shot. That's just a reality. Sure. You have to talk about that. But I think if you pick your spots and then just try to develop as many friendships and have colleagues where if you're with somebody who doesn't look like us, it's not like, I think what Morgan Freeman might have. I'd have to go back and look at the quote, but your comments was you shouldn't be obsessed with it or exclusively focused on it.
Yes,
but there are moments and times you need to have that conversation. But there are also moments and times that you just should forget about it and just move on and realize that it is an artificial barrier and that we have more in common and approach it that way.
And I don't know. I know Morgan Freeman has said a lot of other things about the topic because he gets asked frequently.
Yeah.
I just remember this clip, and I remember it stirred something in me that it kind of helped me graduate from where I was to where I could be, if I will. And what you said there at the end is just like, there are times when you can make decisions not based on that, at least, or let's not bring it up first thing. And let's act based on some other decision-making factor.
Well, the older when I was younger, I used to have opinions on almost everything. And now I certainly do have opinions on a lot of topics, but I just don't know how valuable some of my opinions are. I don't have to have an opinion on everything. I was with a friend of mine who's, African-American, and we were driving halfway across the country, and, we were talking about, we hardly ever talked about race on that trip. But at one point I just, look, I can be your friend. I can, help you, with stories, and, we can do a lot, and I'm always going to be there for you if something happens. But I don't know. I'm not going to understand your journey as an African-American guy. I'm just not I can be there for you, but I'm not going to pretend to ever understand it.
Right.
And I think that's a healthy approach.
Yeah.
I'm going to be an ally, and I'm going to listen.
Sure.
That makes sense.
The power of listening, I feel like, is so underrated.
Yeah.
There was a quote that I've heard. I'm sure many people have adopted this quote, but communication is 80% listening and 20% talking. And how many times have myself or anybody that any of us know drawn a conclusion versus listening before listening, and versus that conclusion would have been much different, if listening was the priority.
Well said.
Well said. Which I think that's partly why podcasts are blowing up right now. I mean, the amount of podcasts that are listed like this one, or the amount of episodes that come out has tripled in the last, I don't know, 3 to 5 years. It's just everyone's on this journey. But it's to listen to a podcast it's to listen, because you cannot respond to a podcast until it's over, or unless you share it and talk about it with someone else.
Right.
So it's almost like are people tired out of just all the talk, and or why is this so popular? What has happened to culture?
You got into it. Why, Phil, Josh? Why do you think why are podcasts blowing up? Josh, what do you think?
Well, my personal opinion, I think learning is just very addictive, and I think as more and more people start to see, or at least certain aspects start to get exposed in the life of our society and also individually, as we have more time to reflect these things, I feel like seeking that solution, which is like realization, which then gives the ability to help others. First, there has to be that learning, and so there was a guy by the name of DJ Khaled. Anybody that knows that guy, he said a quote that I thought was just so profound, which was, it's better to know than to learn, but sometimes you got to learn to know. But when you know, and sometimes it takes some time to get there.
DJ Khaled said that?
DJ Khaled. Yep. He was talking about shoes. So,
That's deep.
Yeah, it really is.
It's respectable right there.
Yeah.
So in digging into a little bit of you, Josh found a picture of you in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
With the president.
That's authentic. It's for real.
How does one get into the Oval Office?
By being from the first in the nation caucus state and running a newspaper. So no, we were the first newspaper in Iowa to endorse President Obama. So when we ran our initial piece on him in late 2006, and then when he announced in Springfield, Illinois in February of 2007, I actually drove over and covered it. I was credentialed, and it was one of the coldest days of my life. I'll never forget how cold it was outside the on the steps of the old State House building in Springfield. So then when he came over and started campaigning in Iowa, I was able to. I knew a lot of people who worked for him. So like Josh Earnest, who ended up being the the press secretary, the presidential spokesperson, who you saw regularly for several years. He started in the Iowa campaign, so he spent some time at our office at the Carroll Times-Herald, and through that I was able to get a number of interviews during the 2008 cycle, and then so I interviewed him 10 times, 7 as a candidate, and then did a 20-minute phone interview one-on-one when President Obama was in office. He was driving around rural Illinois, I remember, and talked to him then, and then did an interview with him in person in Boone, and then in the summer of 2012 was with him for 10 to 15 minutes one-on-one in the Oval Office.
So was that like you got to know him? You got to know him.
I mean, like, yeah, I guess, I wouldn't want to assume too much familiarity there. Sure. Because he did. But we were a rural newspaper that, we are a rural newspaper that is watched by, larger media on the caucuses and on Iowa political matters. So, because of that, they had a political interest in, being in our paper. So I did have a lot of interaction with candidate Obama and a limited amount with President Obama.
So some of that was their campaign managers asking to get connected to you to have something run in your paper, or was all of it you asking for exclusives with?
It was a blend.
A blend.
It was a blend of requests and then opportunities, political opportunities for them.
Which this is this question, we kind of blew past this topic, but it's like, what does it take to publish a newspaper? Because here we're into the depths and the bellies of publishing, to where a presidential campaign and candidate and president is getting connected to a Carroll, Iowa, which is on the map, but it's not like it's Chicago or Los Angeles that they want to be in those newspapers, which those newspapers are probably writing things constantly politically. Like, to what benefit do they have to get into
during the Iowa caucuses, like, it matters more to be in the Jefferson Herald and the Carroll Times-Herald than it does to be in the Los Angeles Times.
Sure.
In many respects, because
of the history of the Iowa caucus and
and then you have somebody like Rick Moran, who he's published in multiple newspapers in Iowa, and people outside of Jefferson follow his views. People in Iowa politics follow his views. So, if he's writing, let's say this cycle, positive columns about Admiral Mike Franken, who's running for the U.S. Senate, then it's not just people in Jefferson who are going to pick up on that. It's people, political people nationally, which affects fundraising. It's people statewide, which affects voting. And then, Rick has a lot of, people who really trust him in this region. So, it affects the turnout and the outcome in West Central Iowa. So it's important that these campaigns reach, those
Right.
few of us who are left that, have those kind of networks.
I mean, that's just how big and how in-depth and complex a political campaign must be like that.
Right.
To have these people who are managing and have their tethers all the way down into rural Iowa because they
That's
know
right.
the impact that can make. Like, that's a gnarly job. Like, no wonder it costs millions of dollars to try to get yourself elected in a way, shape, or form.
That's right.
So do you have to try to stay apolitical or neutral in an aspect?
Yeah, I mean, I'm an independent, so we've endorsed Republicans too, and
Like the Carroll Herald has?
yeah. Yeah, so I like working with people in both parties, and I definitely am, in the, especially the older I get, I'm more in the middle of the road. I think there are some silos on the right and silos on the left that aren't healthy for the country, and I think, the vast majority of people are a little bit more in the middle, which is where I am. So it's sort of natural for me to, go out and cover candidates. And then at the beginning of the pandemic, Phil, I made the decision that I wasn't going to write as many opinion pieces. So readers of the Jefferson Herald probably for 6 or 7 years would have seen my column almost weekly, pretty much weekly for at least 5 to 6 years, maybe even 7. But at the beginning of the pandemic, I thought, oh, hey, look, we need to be part of the solution here. And in this highly divided country, I don't know that I can ask readers what I asked for most of my career, which is when you read me on the editorial page, that's an opinion. When you see my story on page 1 or 3 in the news sections, that's me functioning as a reporter. I have to wear both hats in a rural community if we're going to have both types of writing. So I just abandoned editorial and opinion writing largely to focus only on news gathering. One, because there were so many, just to enhance our credibility and to deal with all the allegations of, bias or people suggesting that we're, the enemy of the people, those type of things. And then also practically, there are just so many stories during COVID that I thought it was more important that I was getting out and elevating the voices of others as they tried to survive the pandemic from a public health standpoint, manage it from an education standpoint, and survive it from a small business standpoint. There were just so many stories out there to be told. And I think, both the Jefferson Herald and Carroll Times Herald were trusted sources, and we worked very hard to make sure that we we're providing legitimate information, legitimate content, and that we weren't going around pointing fingers and beating up on people for not wearing a mask or flying or making other decisions that many people thought were questionable. We get the information out there and trust our readers to make the right decisions themselves, and nobody wants to. You don't want to read a newspaper to be scolded.
Right.
Well,
That's
Dude,
I was just going to confirm that just with Pastor
Yeah.
Isaac, who normally would be sitting right to my right. He has said something that people who are in the darkness don't need to be shown that they're in the darkness. They don't need to be hit and being like, oh, you're so evil. You're so bad. It just, here's what you deserve. They need to be shown the light. They need to be shown the way, And so that just, I don't know, what you said struck a nerve, reminded me of that. It's like, show them the way. Show them what's good out there. Don't just beat people up and punch them with the right and the left hook and the uppercut.
Well, we just try to provide information and let people
Yeah.
find their own way.
Sure.
And so that's what a newspaper, should do, is provide information that allows, that we respect the intelligence and the intelligent differences that our readers have. So our job is to get content out there that informs and allows people to go their own way and to go, in fact, very separate ways at times.
You're okay with that?
Yeah.
Have you ever heard of a book called the GoGiver?
I've not.
It's a good audio book for if you're ever driving.
Okay.
It's like 2.5 hours long.
Great book. Yeah.
This was just on the last podcast too.
Yep.
But there's a role of a character in the book, and he's called the connector. And I'm getting very strong connector vibes from you.
Okay.
Like, you don't necessarily want to be the guy in front of the podium doing the speaking or being like, this is what I stand for and follow me if you want to. Or
I have been that guy, I have been that guy, and I have published a lot of strong opinions. So, I've been in journalism for 30 years, and during a big part of that, I expressed very strong opinions in the Jefferson Herald and the Carroll Times Herald and other papers. I just, in the last 4 to 5 years, I've just, sort of refocused, my time, efforts, and again, I just don't think people want the owner of a newspaper out there, blasting away with opinions. I'm certainly capable of it, and if you go into my home office closet at home, there are a lot of plaques and certificates with awards for editorial and opinion writing. It's probably actually the style of writing that I'm best at. But I just don't think that's what our communities need right now. I think they need solutions. I think we need as many positive stories as we can get out there, and I think people need to understand that the newspaper is not trying to guide them to a certain conclusion, but give them all the information and tools to get to their own different conclusions, and that those different conclusions, that pluralistic society, should be respected and trusted.
I have to jump in here really quick because I know for a fact I want to know this, and I know that there's going to be people at home that are going to want to know this as well. I want to get your opinion on 2 4-letter words.
Okay.
Fake news. What do you think about it? What do you think it actually is? And how has that affected you personally? Being in the business for many, many years, doing a lot of hard editorial and journalistic work, having that term kind of dominate our lives for the last 6 years.
So certainly there are some people in the media that, could have done a better job through the years of reaching out and elevating more conservative voices. I mean, there definitely are areas of the media where, there has historically been liberal bias. That's just a fact. But having worked in multiple newsrooms, I have to tell you that the worst thing you could be accused of is, getting an incomplete story or a biased story, or trying to game a story. Like the self-policing that went on in most newsrooms I was in, that would have been, the cardinal sin to behave or write that way. So
what happens to somebody if they're caught fabricating a story?
Usually they're fabricated, they're gone.
Okay.
Fabricated.
Gone just for one newspaper, or do they go to another newspaper? What happens?
So Jason Blair, who famously fabricated a story for the New York Times, you probably don't even know who he is, because he was, run out of journalism probably 15 years ago for, creating, for basically fabricating a story. So no, overall, the enemy of the people and the fake news tropes have been devastating to our business.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about our papers is that, if you don't like something that we write, I'm accountable, and Brandon Hurley, our editor here, is accountable. You can find us, you can get us, who we are, and we mainly cover local news. So how are we going to write a fake story about the Jefferson City Council?
Right.
How am I going to write a fake story about the Carroll County Board of Supervisors?
Well,
how are we going to write a fake story about Jefferson Ram football? How are we?
Right.
I mean,
right.
So the beauty of a community newspaper is everything you see in the paper, you either know to be true because you saw it yourself, or you're 1 to 2 degrees of separation from somebody who can verify it. So items that are in our paper accrue credibility by proximity because they're next to so much other content that's true.
Yeah.
and demonstrably true and largely universally regarded as true in a community. So that's why it's so important that we, keep community newspapers going, as long as I'm here and well after my time, Josh.
Do you feel like there's a differentiation between a community newspaper and perhaps maybe a national newspaper, where maybe a national newspaper doesn't have that same level of accountability? That there could be some type of thing going on there, or do you feel like across the board?
No, that's a great question, and there is a difference because I live on Hillcrest Drive, in the middle of Carroll. I
Right.
live in rolling hills in Carroll,
Right,
in a
right.
middle class neighborhood, and I live a middle class lifestyle. Involved in different organizations in both Carroll and Jefferson, and run into people in the grocery store. Run into people having a beer at Curps in Carroll or something like that.
Hmm.
And so, and I have to live in the place that I cover. I choose to live in the place that I cover, whereas, journalists at larger organizations, they do parachute stories where they come in and, they don't really have to cultivate those sources or care that much about them. They can burn them if they want, because they're never going to have to use them again. They do the story and then they're gone. Like how many reporters from CBS or CNN or the New York Times or the Washington Post who are now in Buffalo, New York, covering the massacre there? How many of those reporters are really ever going to be back working a story in Buffalo?
Right.
Let's say there's 100 journalists there right now, besides the reporters for the Buffalo News, or maybe somebody who's writing for the New York Times who might cover something else within, the state of New York. The vast majority of the reporters there will probably never eat at another Buffalo restaurant or stay at another Buffalo hotel once they depart for, to cover the next massacre in, whatever state.
Do you feel like if you could snap your fingers and you could make something happen, like you were God at this point, you could do it, would you make every journalist a local journalist only?
No, what I would do is break up Facebook and eliminate Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act.
Okay.
So Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, that defines me as a newspaper as a publisher. So I'm responsible for the content that I put in my paper.
Right.
And I can be sued for libel. And in fact, we were sued for libel. We won. It was a fairly high-profile case involving a former police officer who had a relationship with a 17-year-old female. So anyway, our story held up in court, but we were sued. We are accountable for what we publish. Facebook, Twitter, and other social media platforms are not. They're
Right.
considered platforms, not publishers. So you can go out and put like the most horrible material ever on those platforms. Like the shooter in Buffalo had like a manifesto out on different platforms, and then he actually like live streamed the killings on Twitch, which is owned by Amazon. So we would never like publish photos of. One time we accidentally. I shouldn't laugh at this. One time we did accidentally. There was somebody who was. I think they committed suicide. They were killed by a train in Carroll, and we tried to scrub like the body was like covered with a sheet, and we just didn't edit the photo properly. We thought we had it edited, but anyway, so the body ended up in the paper, and we justifiably took a lot of grief for it. But if somebody sent me a photo of people laying in the parking lot outside that grocery store, and I wouldn't publish it. But yet, Amazon and Twitch profited from it.
Right.
I mean, it was viewed 3 million times.
So if like let's just say the Washington Post posts something on Facebook, the liability falls on the Washington Post,
That's
right?
right. That's right. Well, because it's also published in the Washington Post on the Washington Post's website. So if somebody came after them, they'd come after them for what was on the Washington Post platform. The Facebook posting by the Washington Post would just amplify, would just drive more traffic to the Post. So that's the way they would use that vehicle. But if somebody just goes on and you see it in a number of I've seen it in Jefferson where people will go on a local crime story, or they'll talk about something at school,
Mhm.
and just make wild allegations. And Facebook is not responsible for any of that.
But they are acting as a publication of some sort.
I think they're a publisher. I don't think there's any
Right.
doubt they're a publisher.
Right. Right.
But in the infancy of the internet, once it was released from the Pentagon and became a tool that all of us could use, um, I talked to Vice President Mike Pence. I interviewed him 3 weeks ago and talked to him about this very topic and asked him about Section 230, about social media, about regulating the internet more, about how destructive some of these monopolistic platforms are. And we did delve into that topic, like pretty intensely.
Destructive.
Yeah,
Destructive because they're not held responsible for what they're putting out.
right.
So they're putting out things that really shouldn't be seen
And
or heard
he
or listened to. And
Right, and he agreed with that. He thought
Sure.
that there needed to be some more regulation, and that possibly Section 230 should be reviewed.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
What's the most destructive thing about Facebook? Just that anything's on it? Or you mean there's
I think it's particularly destructive in rural areas, and here's why: because what you just know more of the people, you're closer to the people that you see posting misinformation. So when they put content out there that is inaccurate and horribly inaccurate, and oftentimes racist or otherwise destructive, I mean, those are coming from you see a name of somebody that a family member, somebody in the community, and then so there's that element to it. So you're more likely to maybe believe the misinformation than you would if you were in a suburb or you were living in Riverside County, California, with 4 million people. um and then there's also the issue of you are if there's bullying going on, a lot of the people that are saying horrible things about you. And I've experienced that where I've had different stories people don't like, or something else is going on in our community, and you start getting attacked online, and you're like thinking to myself, well, wait, like, this guy's business is like 2 blocks away. Why does he just come talk to me?
Mhm.
Why is he? And so I'm used to the criticism publicly, so that's not gonna send me to the slip my wrist or anything like that. But for other people that maybe aren't as accustomed to that type of abuse, you can feel more personal, because it's not coming from just some random person in Riverside, California, attacking you, another sort of to them random person in Riverside, California. It's coming from somebody in your own community who
Right.
you might know, and it's just horrible the way, because then that ends up severing opportunities for potential connection and collaboration, and it's really
Sure.
taken the charm and the decency, I think, out of
Sure.
living in rural Iowa. And then you take a monopolistic machine like Amazon and watch what that's doing to our downtown retail. And it's going to be challenging for us to make the case that people should live in rural communities when you put those twin problems in front of you.
I I've heard a lot of examples like that. Someone said, like, what did they say? I mean, when you go to a lot of these community-based organizations, GCDC and Main Street, it's full of people who like care about the community and just
Right.
care about the betterment of all the people, and that Jefferson exists. But then you hear other people who are not necessarily connected in those groups, and they say there's just nobody good around anymore. There's nobody that's decent around here. And I'm like, well, I know plenty of people that are decent,
There are a
but
lot, yeah, hundreds,
not in your
thousands.
thousands, right? But obviously not in that person's circle. And so
Yeah, that's the danger. You can get, big social media and streaming services and our digitized life allow people to sort of curate their own cocoons, where they only are served content that, like, makes them comfortable.
yeah, we were just talking about that. That was a topic that came up at the Lyceum. Which, do you know about the Lyceum? Had you heard about that?
I haven't.
They haven't. It was just a local community group, Tony Wietrich, Emily Roner. They put together the Lyceum, which was, there's, I believe, 5 locations in the United States that still do this, but it's basically like a mini town hall. There was a topic, and there was 2 kind of speakers that were engaged in question and answer type format. Then there was a crowd that got to listen and chip in if they wanted or ask a question. But then that crowd broke up into small groups and then discussed ideas that were presented.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And then the idea was to come back as a big group and then share what your takeaways were from the whole night as you broke off into your small groups, which was just a really interesting process. But I mean, it was a lot of very kind, good-hearted, open-minded people.
I hope people left their phones in the car. It probably would have been better if they did.
Right. There was not a lot of phone activity.
Yeah.
No, there definitely was not.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I set mine on the table and then I left it. I walked away from it, my phone and my wallet, and it all was there afterwards. What are you doing?
Oh, I'm just looking up stuff.
You're just doing stuff?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
Okay, great. What are you looking up?
Well, I was looking up Lyceum, so
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's beat right up your alley, man,
yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure. Well, those type of conversations are so productive, even
Yes,
if it's just
and-
like just getting to know other people and getting connected. We as human beings need that. So
They call it the Lyceum movement, and I think it's a movement because it gets people out of that cocoon that you mentioned, that online streaming virtual cocoon that doesn't give you any personal connection.
Right.
And here we are talking about connection again. You have a strong connector vibe.
Well, I hope that's good.
I think it's great.
Okay.
I think it's great. And I think more people need people like you to connect them to what they need. Because I think
our community needs more people like you and Josh who are, talented in your early 30s, good, from what I can see, really good family guys who, I'm impressed with what you have set up here. And I think, your friendship and what you're contributing to the community is just terrific. And, hopefully you both stay here until you're my age and beyond.
Yeah. I think that's the plan right now.
Yeah.
Anything can change. Used to think 5 years was the time frame that my wife and I allowed ourselves. That if we weren't plugged in and connected and happy, we'd leave. We'd go back to South Dakota where Bridget's family is from.
Okay. Well, Sioux Falls is a nice place. Isn't she from
It
Sioux
is.
Falls?
That area, yeah. And Brookings a little north of there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Elkton, South Dakota.
Is that where South Dakota State is? Brookings?
Brookings, yep.
Yeah.
Spot on. Yep.
Are they the Jackrabbits? Is that right?
Spot on again.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that where she went
Yes.
to undergrad?
Yep.
And then did you meet in Minneapolis?
Kind of, yes. I went to chiropractor school in Minneapolis
At
with
Northwestern.
her, at Northwestern
Yeah.
with her cousin.
Oh, okay. So you met through her cousin.
Yep.
Is he or she still a friend of yours?
Yes, he is.
Okay.
Great friend. Best
A
friend.
chiropractor too?
Yep.
Okay. Where?
For sure. He's in Brookings.
Oh, okay.
Kills me we're not closer. It's the worst.
That's not that far.
You're right, but you're right.
Highway 20 is 4-lane now, so that helps.
Huge help.
Right.
Can't wait till Highway 30 is 4-lane.
Yeah, we should have been first, but
So be it.
Governor Branstad had other ideas.
So be it. Here we are. At least it's starting,
Right.
Yeah, at least it's starting. Well, we're nearing the end of our time here, but this is the last couple of minutes is usually where we try to have a little fun.
Okay. Shoot.
You got a favorite movie?
Oh, Inherit the Wind, 1960 movie about the Scopes monkey trial with Spencer Tracy, Gene Kelly. So Gene Kelly plays H.L. Mencken, who's this famous hardened journalist who used to work for the Baltimore Sun. So a character based on H.L. Mencken. So yeah, that's definitely my favorite movie. I also love the movie Sideways. Have you ever seen Sideways with Paul Giamatti, Thomas Hayden Church, Sandra Oh, Virginia Madsen? Came out in like 05, 06.
Sideways. Put it on the
Yeah,
list.
it's about these two guys go to Thomas Hayden Church and Paul Giamatti. They go from San Diego and L.A. to wine country for a bachelor party, and all sorts of hijinks ensue. And Virginia, it's just an amazing, ensemble cast with the four of them. So
Right on.
I watched that quite a bit. So yeah, those would be two of my favorite movies.
2 movies I'd never heard of.
I'm a lot older than you are, Phil.
You've got a couple of years. Yeah. That's all right.
Yeah.
I got a lot of movies to get through. Which we were talking about Count of Monte Cristo.
It's
earlier.
a great movie. Jim Caviezel is that?
Jim Caviezel for sure.
Yeah. Okay,
Yep.
you got it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, I was in Washington D.C. and a friend of mine and I used to go to a lot of movies on on Sunday, and so I remember we played like Trivial Pursuit with his wife, and then we headed out for a movie late Sunday afternoon, and there was some blockbuster we wanted to go see, and it was sold out. So we decided we'd see Count of Monte Cristo, and it like became one of our favorite movies.
Yeah.
I can't even remember what the blockbuster we missed was.
Back in 2002. Who knows?
Yeah, I know, right?
Right.
Yeah.
What was going on? What was coming out in 2002? You know,
I can't wait to see the movie Maverick, right? The follow up to Top Gun.
Yeah, right on.
I'm old enough that I saw Top Gun in the theater.
Okay, well, I wasn't born yet when that came out, but I'm excited to see Maverick too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tom Cruise, I like Tom Cruise as an actor, a guy who does his own stunts.
Right.
A gritty guy who's just willing to stick it all out there.
I've been to that bar in San Diego, the one where, they sing "You've Got That Love and Feeling." You remember that?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So it's right by Seaport Village, and it's actually kind of like a barbecue place.
Oh wow.
It's right across from the Marriott Marquis and the Grand Hyatt, so kind of in a prime spot there. So a lot of people that have been to San Diego have been in that bar, me included.
Okay.
Yeah. I was gonna say you travel a lot. That's awesome.
I was gonna say, where's your favorite place that you've traveled to?
Yeah.
So I suppose the place that was the most illuminating and life-changing for me was several years ago. I did visit Nicaragua, and I went, with some close friends. Actually, Carlos Arguello's family. He's with, we've already talked about Latino IQ. But the neat thing about going was I saw like real Nicaragua. So I saw some of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life. Colors down there that they're just different than the colors you see here. There's just a vibrancy to life that's amazing. But it is a third world country, so you see poverty that is just unimaginable to American eyes. Yeah.
What was the biggest thing that struck you with what you saw?
Just how good question, Josh. Just how like casual and everyday some people were when they encountered, like I remember seeing a guy who I think, if I remember correctly, was, missing both of his legs, and he was just laying in the street outside of a convenience store, and people just walked around him.
Wait, so he was missing both his legs, and he had bandages, or they were just gone, and they had already healed, or
I think they had already healed.
Okay,
but he was just
laying
there
Wow.
as somebody with a physical disability, and he was just laying there. And then we were walking around by the Capitol in Managua, and there was a little girl who came up to me. I bought an ice cream cone, and had just started to eat it, and she came up and she was clearly starving. So, we went and bought her an ice cream cone, and then I even gave her mine. It was just I've just never seen poverty like that. Now, I was in Los Angeles a couple of weeks ago, and all the homelessness that I saw, was pretty mind bending. I'd never seen. I lived in Washington D.C. for 4 years. Went to school in Chicago 4 years, and been in every state in the lower 48. Done a lot of domestic travel. I've just never seen anything like the homelessness I saw in Los Angeles in the United States of America.
Are those experiences things that drive you to do what you do as far as like news and opinion and community outreach and connecting people together and doing what you do, wanting to bring basically everyone up as high as possible, right? To bring people together.
Right. Yeah, I'd say that's I also like, I'm not somebody who's given to envy, so I like celebrating other people's successes. And I think that's been something that's been good with the Jefferson and Carroll papers, is we definitely celebrate successes. A lot of people in journalism think their mission is to knock people down or to find flaws or holes. And, that's certainly part of our job, is to point out hypocrisy and point out flaws, particularly with, government officials, because, they're paid by tax dollars. I've just always thought part of our job is to, be part of the solution and to lift people up. So when I see those situations in places outside of, where we live, Josh, you bring those back, and you look for, inspiration. Like there's a beautiful public library in San Diego that like helped inspire me to fight to get our new modern library in Carroll. But yeah, then when you see some of the poverty, I guess the thing that it really does the most for me is it just amplifies my own humility and makes me realize, how fortunate I am. And then when I come back, I just try to, apply that humility when I'm working and writing stories. I think, the greatest attribute a journalist can really have actually is humility, because it really is a humbling experience for people to let you into their lives, their homes, and have you, tell their stories on their best days and their worst days.
Wow.
If you weren't a newspaper man writing stories, what would you do instead?
I would probably, I'm so impressed with this podcast setup that I would probably sit here with you and Josh and just, put out podcasts all day. We could just sit here and do this all day.
All day.
I'm not even kidding.
Okay, well, if you're ready to retire, then I guess we have a backup job for you.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I am incredibly thankful that you took some time out of your day to come do this with us.
Oh, it's been great to get to know you a little bit better, Josh. Good to see you as well.
For sure.
And keep doing this. This is a really cool venture, and I think this adds a lot to our community. So, and you're a terrific questioner. You're a terrific host, and maybe you missed your calling, man. Maybe you should have, instead of being a chiropractor, you should have been a journalist. But
don't tell him that. We need him.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I've heard you're good at that. So, but hey, this way you can do both.
Yes, I get a taste of both for sure, and get to contribute to life in a little bit different way for sure.
Right.
It's good for me. It's good for others, I hope. So
exactly.
I'll keep doing it as long as there's value. So thank you for bringing
value. Great job.
Well, gosh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Outro music. This is it. This is the part of the other theme. The theme song is the intro and the outro. Right. But Mr. Burns, appreciate you.
Thanks, Phil.
Josh, say goodbye.
Awesome. See ya.
See ya. Episode 31. That's a wrap. See you next time.